Today, we're going to talk about the on or off rule. How often are you trying to get work done and then you end up checking email, responding to a friend, sort of working, reading a random article, getting back to work, and you're in this limbo state where you're sort of working and you're sort of not working and you're really tired at the end of the day and you didn't get that much done. This doesn't often happen when you have a really intense deadline and you have to get something done. This is when the deadline is a little further out or it's optional work that you are choosing to get done, things that are important but not urgent. I think a lot of us find ourselves in this state often. And the downside of it is not just that our work suffers because we're unable to focus. Our relaxation and rest suffers because we're never really in a true focus state and we're never in a true restful state. We're in this in-between state. So today, let's talk about how this looks, what we can do about it, and form a plan. I first thought about this in college when I had a friend of mine who was taking really hard science classes. And they basically never did anything social because 7 days a week, they were either in class or working or feeling like they should be working. Because they had a hard time focusing, they would often put off work and then just kind of sit around their dorm room going back and forth between reading material and getting distracted. Now, they later got an ADHD diagnosis, which is a factor in all of this, and you should definitely seek out a professional if you feel this applies to you, or even look at resources. Like there are great YouTube channels, like one I'll link down below, for ways that your brain might focus better if you're neurodivergent. But I think all of us across the spectrum find ourselves in this state sometimes. And there could be other videos where we could approach why we're procrastinating. For instance, if there's a mental block, if we have an issue with the work at hand in general, if we're afraid. But in general, in this video, I want to keep it really simple, which is the idea that if you set aside a certain amount of time, you've probably heard of the Pomodoro technique, where you set aside a certain amount of time. It can be 25 minutes. That's often a good starter chunk, but you can go with even less if you're not really used to focus work and you get distracted really easily. You might even start with 5 minutes. You're going to set a timer and really just do nothing else but the task at hand. If you get distracted, you start zoning out, you accidentally check your phone, it's okay. Just immediately get back to work because you remember you're forming a new habit and you're learning a new skill potentially. And then over time, you can build up this work capacity. It's kind of like working out. The first day you go to work out, you're not going to be able to do a really intense workout, lifting a certain amount of weight, doing a certain amount of exercises. Otherwise, you could get really fatigued or too sore or even hurt something. I mean, you're not going to get hurt from focusing too hard, but you get my point. Our goal is to simply set aside a certain amount of time and to be able to grow that time we're able to focus over time. And then the beautiful part is, let's say that you set aside a couple hours of really focused time to work and you're having the breaks because you're doing it in intervals. 20-minute chunk on, maybe 5-minute chunk off. You can look up the Pomodoro technique and how people often increase that time. I'll link it below, but again, you're going to do what works for you. But then the beautiful part is later that day, and Cal Newport has this where he says, work shut down and he checks out. And I started doing it myself because a lot of us that are hard workers have a hard time turning our brain off at the end of the day. Maybe we're still thinking of things we need to do. Maybe we have more ideas. Maybe we even get anxious about work tomorrow. But if you have organized your to-do list for tomorrow and said, you know what, I'm going to shut down. I'm not working right now. Then your brain and body can go into a more true rest state. You're going to be reading a book and you'll really just be reading that book. This is also teaching us to single task, to be present with whatever is in front of us versus that scattered feeling that a lot of us feel in this century, because there's almost an infinite amount of things you could be doing with all that's available to us now. This got even worse during the pandemic when a lot of people were working from home. And I think this in-between work and not work state probably got even more exaggerated for us because people were always home and there wasn't a clear turning off time. Versus when you used to leave the office, sure, work could follow you through email, but now it's just become even more blurry. And a little bit of this has to do with workaholism. Some people have a job where they have to respond to email on a vacation. And working with a lot of clients, I was talking to one of them lately how we think that some people, there's almost a pride in always being on. So even if they could say, you know what, I'm not going to check my work email for X amount of time, it's that inability to turn off, either due to anxiousness or due to that pride we get from feeling like I'm always available, I'm always on. But that doesn't enable us to do our best work, show up in our best way, or feel our best. And of course, there can be workplaces where the boundaries or certain toxicity make it very hard to have set off times. That's a separate topic. Here we're talking about the work that we do have control over, either for an organization or work that we're doing for ourselves, such as studying or working on a project. Going off of my work with clients, I work in the health and fitness space. And a lot of people, when they're trying to do interval training, which has its place in a lot of fitness programs, they go in the middle. They kind of push and then they kind of break, and they never really get their heart rate to certain target zones that we often want them to get to. Their bursts of intensity aren't as high intensity as we'd like, and their recovery times are not as low intensity as we would like. And I feel as though we do the same thing with our work. Our bursts are not fully focused and our breaks are not really breaks. So see how this works for you. I want you to try to have firm times for yourself where you're on or where you're off, and see how it affects you psychologically. Almost everyone that I've talked to about this has resonated with it in some way. And often when you hear about people working really long days, they're not necessarily focused for those 16 hours. It's really hard to have very intense focus for long amounts of time, and particularly for creative work. If you're trying to work on something that is creative, you might even play with short bursts of time, like even only an hour or 2 hours a day total, where you're extremely focused, and then see for you how much of your day can you truly be in that state, and then play around with having true rest for yourself and see how you feel. For myself lately, I've been going through some health considerations, and this has been really helpful because it's given my body true rest when I'm off work, because I'm making that clear distinction. If you stuck around till the end, you're getting rewarded with a little bonus content that I remembered in the edit. One, I am really bad at this. That's why I shot this video. I'm often bad at focusing. I'm often bad at taking breaks. But when I keep this in mind, it helps. So I just wanted to keep it real and be transparent. Secondly, I think there's different personality types. I call these marathoners and sprinters. There's people that are very consistent and they will do a little bit of work over a longer period of time leading up to a test. They're just really good about, I'm going to study 1 to 2 hours a day for 3 to 4 weeks. And then there are people that you could call them procrastinators. You could think of other reasons for this, but they work in very intense bursts. And I know that that doesn't work for extremely difficult classes or projects where you really do need to work ahead of time, such as a dissertation. But some people just do work in very intense bursts. And I think that sometimes we can work with that versus trying to fit into the mold that other people have set for us, and finding what works for ourselves is really important too. Working with our natural workflow patterns. For instance, instead of just sticking to a schedule, seeing when do you have energy? When are you feeling creative? When can you focus? And there's so much that could be said on that. For instance, Stephen Pressfield in either Going Pro or The War of Art, I think it's Going Pro, sitting down and at a set time, day after day after day, and then the muse shows up versus just waiting till you're inspired. So that's a pro for the other camp. Like, there's so much nuance here. And I really do think we need to find what works for us. But one last tip within that is with Pomodoro techniques, I personally never actually set a timer. I don't know why I spent so much time on the video on Pomodoro. I think it's just because it's the most typical structure that a lot of people could start with. I think a lot of people have success starting with that. But I find it disruptive to interrupt my flow when I'm doing creative work and then I just set a timer and then it goes off and then I feel interrupted. But I often notice myself starting to get distracted, checking email, checking texts when I've probably gone too long without a break. So I'm still playing around with it. Some people do better with 50-minute chunks, 10-minute break, because then you're actually able to get more immersed in the work that could work for you. Maybe you set a timer, but instead of it making a noise, you just set it going up instead of down. And then you just notice, oh, how long can I usually work before needing a break? Saying it again, seeing what works for you. And then even within that, what types of breaks work for you? For instance, there's certain breaks where you go out and see the sun, you get water, you move your body, you do something that is not going to necessarily get you in a completely different state, such as doom scrolling for a while that could completely disrupt your mental flow. So also thinking about what we're doing on those breaks is helpful. Thank you for being here. See you next time. Due to some of those health considerations, I don't know if it's going to be every Thursday that I'm posting. So if you like getting this content, you can turn on your notifications on YouTube, which I hope you have silent so you can do your work. But when you log on, see that little bell, check out these videos. But your work is most important. Okay, thanks for being here. Bye.